Hello, Q&R Code listeners. Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed last week's episode. I know that we did, and that I feel like I'm still riding that high from such a good episode. Anywho, I'm Quinn, if you haven't been here before. On the other side, Riley, introduce yourself.
I'm Riley, and I also had a great time last episode, ready for another super fun time. An update. I have purchased oysters today. I don't know
Very exciting.
That's a teaser because I don't know exactly when I'm going to post my Martha recipe of oysters, but I do feel it should be soon because this is what I was taught about oyster season. This is what they say. If a month has an
From who?
R in it, this was
Where
from.
did you learn this?
I learned this from someone that grew up on the coast in North Carolina in the Outer Banks where they get seafood, so I feel like this is probably a good rule of thumb. But
Okay.
yes, oysters are best in the months that have an R in it. So that's like September through April. I think it's because oysters, they like cold water more
Oh,
than
okay.
when the ocean heats up for the summertime. That's what I conjecture from that being kind of like a fall winter timeline. So I knew I wanted to get this recipe going. If you don't know, I'm referring to my Martha Stewart cooking project of cooking the 100 recipes in her most recent cookbook called The Cookbook. So I'm excited about that. That's what's on the top of my mind in terms of updates. Other than
And you
that,
said
the
you
thing.
you bought those at a little seafood shop? Tell us, really immerse us in this experience, Riley. Not everyone knows exactly what you have going on. Tell us about it. Also, tell us about your date. I feel like you're inspired by oysters right now. So let's just dive in. Seafood talk.
Okay, I'm think that I'm just inspired in general to be having seafood right now because I do live in Virginia. For those that don't know, Chesapeake Bay is right there, like an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours away from me, which is known for its oysters and other shellfish. But fish in general, clearly, when you're coastal, tend to have access to fresher seafood than when you live in Wyoming. And so I just right now want to take the opportunity while I live somewhere that you can get pretty fresh seafood to have some of it, while also keeping in mind that a lot of seafood practices are not the most sustainable. There is a lot of overfishing. There are a lot of problems with it, just like the meat industry on land. Like, you try to be conscientious about that impact when you're having it. So I went to a local, smaller supplier rather than the Albertsons, Kroger's, whatever grocery stores of the world that tend to not have as many ethics involved in their supply chain. And long story short, found out about these guys who are in the town over from us and have only been open about a year. And it was really fun. It's like going to an local butcher shop, like where Quinn and I went together to get a delicious sandwich in Colorado, but that same sort of vibe, except for with fish themed. So they have like specialty sauces that are maybe a cocktail sauce or a tartar or things like that you would normally serve with fish, and different like fish seasoning blends and their array of fresh stuff laid out. So it was really fun to go in and look. They also, like at the butcher shop, getting a hot sandwich, have some hot items or some lunch items. I did indulge in a lobster roll that was mighty delicious. I went for the hot buttered style rather than the cold mayo style. And that was my little foray there. asking the guy about their supply chain. He's clearly very passionate about fish and fishing practices, very knowledgeable. So I also think that's always a nice part about going into a shop that's a smaller, more local thing, because especially if you are getting into it, there tends to be someone that is passionate or more knowledgeable there. Whereas, not to say this couldn't happen, but a lot of the times if you go into just the counter at a bigger supermarket, that person might not necessarily be doing that job because that's really their thing, you know?
Yeah.
And he did give me some pointers about shucking oysters. He said that the most common injury that happens is people piercing the little meaty part between your thumb and first finger because of how you hold it. So he said, like, wear one of the gloves and also, like, do like a big towel wrapped around and protecting yourself there, because the way you come into it, if the nice knife slips, like, that's where you're gonna hit. So
The towel is a good idea. That I like that.
last weekend, because it was our 2-year courthouse wedding anniversary, our smaller, yay,
You made it
and
2 years.
So we wanted to go. Brayden actually surprised me by booking a date. That's always nice when the man makes a reservation. I don't know how it is in your guys' dynamics for you hetero couples out there. In our situation, usually I am the one making a reservation, so that was very nice that he planned this out independently.
Yes.
And we went for happy hour because this restaurant does discounted oysters. Not in a sketchy way. It's not like all you can eat oysters for $10. You still are going to have a more expensive meal, but my philosophy with seafood is I would rather that.
Yes.
A little bit less, a little bit better quality. And those were so yummy. I love when I'm doing it though. Some people I feel like aren't even touching their toppings or doing like the littlest dab. I'm doing like some of the vinegar, some of the, it's not marinara, obviously. What's the sauce? Cocktail sauce, I guess. Lemon, hot sauce. Like, I judge my
Yes.
oysters. That's part of the experience for me.
Yeah. Well, the first time I ever tried, I believe maybe I had tried it actually once before, maybe, but the first time I remember trying oysters on the half shell was for Riley's bachelorette trip, because, it was Riley's bachelorette trip and this girl enjoys a nice fresh oyster on the half shell. And so I said, I'm not just going to sit here and watch you eat them. I will try with you. And we were in New York at a delightful spot that, once again, I am not someone who is resilient about seafood. Like, I will only have seafood when I feel very good about the quality, and it's not something I want to overeat or feel an appetite for all the time anyhow. And tried it, and I was actually surprised by the fact that I enjoyed it, but for sure, I'm a sauce girl, whatever it is. I like sauce. I want my things with sauce. If sauce is an option, I'm going to take it. And so I definitely make up each one with a dab of each thing. And yeah, surprisingly, I do like them. It's not something I want to do often, but I would be very interested in trying your recipe. Anyway, thanks for sharing about that, Rye. I can't wait to see you continue cooking through your cookbook, and I am dying to have the scones like what you made us, those currant and orange, what was the orange perfumed or whatever she called it.
Orange scented
Currant scones. They were so yummy.
They were so yummy, and now I have a smaller biscuit cutter than I had then, and I'm like, that would be so nice to just have these little bite size. Well, they're not bite size. I mean, it's still like
A couple bites.
whatever. A couple bites of a little scone, which also reminded me that I didn't tell you guys about making my first I think, first foraged recipe. That's not true in the sense of we have gone and picked like blackberries and picked huckleberries, but I have never harvested flowers from a tree before. I went out and collected magnolia petals, which are so beautiful. Magnolias have big pink blossoms. They're not in all parts of the US, so I didn't really see them until moving out here. But I think they do have them in the Midwest because who I got the recipe from is the Black Forager. She lives in Ohio. And so you take the petals, you cook it into a simple syrup. So it's like water, sugar, and the petals, cook it down, and they have a gingery flavor to them. So it's supposed to be like a magnolia ginger snap cookie. I do have to say, my cookies did not turn out like hers at all. Hers were very like pillowy, cookies that look more rounded and not like spread out. Mine spread out like a flat like sugar cookie. And I don't know, she made hers with vegan butter and I made mine with regular butter. That could be a factor. Who actually knows? I don't know enough about it to tell you why mine turned out the way they did. But it was really fun to just like go out with my tote bag and forage for something and make a recipe with it.
Did you feel like you were being a little thief stealing from someone's magnolia tree? Were you like looking over your shoulder?
Well, first of all, I did it from like a public property area, so it wasn't like I was in someone's yard. That I would obviously ask
Steps
about
through the gate.
Yeah, but also they're all like they once they bloom turn over very quickly. There were already so many petals on the ground that if I wasn't gathering them that night, it was supposed to be cold enough to frost, so they would have just like fallen to the ground and turned brown anyway. So if you looked at those trees before I was there and after, you never would have noticed.
Yeah, that's exciting and so fun though, Rye. I wish I could have tasted them. Did you guys eat them all up?
It made way more than I expected it to make, so I shared some with my neighbors and some stayed at my house, and we have one left.
Nice. And what did you think of them?
It was funny because the syrup turns this very pretty red, like translucent red color, but the cookies were green. So I don't know.
The science of baking really is amazing, and I can't begin to understand it.
No. Something that I've been thinking about is how celebrities will really be so like in the zeitgeist and then you don't hear about them at all. Harry Styles was like so the topic of conversation, I feel like, for maybe a year and a half there. And now, the last couple years, nothing. I don't know if this man is alive anymore. Like, I don't hear about him ever. And
that is sensitive after what happened to his bandmate.
Oh my gosh. I didn't even think of that. I'm sorry.
That's like the other day, my client, who was a dancer and she was a professional dancer, told me that she broke her back doing it, and then later in the conversation I clocked that I said I feel like if I went and did a ballet class right now that I would break my back, and I was like, so sorry. Not sensitive of the situation. Anyway, I don't mean to actually call you out, but
that's okay. Clearly, I didn't mean to say that. Whatever. I don't mean it. I take that back. I'm just using him as an example.
Yes, you haven't heard from him in a while.
Someone that you can hear so much about. I'm such a freaking peasant, a non-celebrity, that it's taken me this long in my life to clock that is PR, and whenever a celebrity is more in the news, typically, not always, but he was on tour for an album during that time, and he had a movie coming out with Don't Worry Darling, and now we've been hearing a lot more about Taylor Swift. Obviously, she's someone that is particularly always relevant, but she's also been touring. And we're hearing about Sabrina Carpenter and her breakup with Barry Keoghan, whatever. She's on tour. Like, I just am realizing more and more, oh, we're probably just getting fed stories by people that have something going on, whether it's a book or a show coming out or touring. That is why we get like the celebrity stories, even when they seem like they have to do with their personal life. Even people like Meryl Streep. I just recently got pushed a story about her dating Martin Short.
Yeah.
And I was like,
Which is
oh
so
my gosh,
cute.
which is adorable. And I wish them a lifetime of happiness. And then I realized they have a show that's like, and this, I think a new season is coming out for Only Murders in the Building,
Yeah.
or will be. So that's
Yes.
it. That's all I had to say about that.
I definitely have thought the same thing too. I feel like with Harry Styles being an example, the only thing I hear about him recently is like people still bring up that he's a straight hetero man that likes to wear dresses, and I love that.
But my thing about that is, why do people get so hung up on being like, well, Harry Styles is straight, when he hasn't made that claim one way or another? But I just think, not me getting so deep into this, also bringing up with Billie Eilish, where so many people were like, she's queer baiting, and then she finally was like, I'm bi. But I just don't think it's right to like force people to declare their sexuality by ascribing them one. And Harry Styles
Yeah.
has specifically like made sure not to confirm or deny when different rumors of him being queer have come up, or people asking him if he only likes girls. He clearly wants that to be private.
Gotcha. That is, I mean, obviously, I think it's true that we do not need to be trying to assume people's sexuality or anything because of dating history or whatever it may be. That reminds me of that Anthony, like hearing him on an interview recently who just came out with No Taste Like Home, which again, I really highly recommend people watch. I still haven't watched all the episodes. That reminds me, maybe I'll do one tonight because it sounds so fun. But he said like he getting into Queer Eye was initially nervous because it was not his plan ever to be, first of all, in a show like that. He wanted to act and just wasn't really succeeding in finding acting gigs, and
My gosh,
he
I had no
didn't,
idea.
yeah, I didn't know this about him either. And then he was nervous and didn't really, being queer was not something, I hope I'm quoting this correctly from him, but the sentiment I took away was that that wasn't something that he had really planned on making super public, or like definitely not really a part of his career that was noteworthy. And um so I thought that was interesting to learn. Also,
What
different train of
podcast
thought.
was this on?
That was on Pod Crushed, which I have here and there listened to. Remember I told you it's the one with um
You guy, right?
yeah, why am I just now in this moment?
Is it Peyton something? What is it?
No, it's
Penn Badgley.
Penn Badgley, yes. Which there's another season of You that's going to come out, and I am excited. I do think that that's a fun and crazy show to watch. Um, which
Oh my
I
gosh.
believe, is the producer.
Speaking of shows, there's a new season of Love on the Spectrum out. Our favorite all
yes.
time best show. So excited to see
I'm
that.
so excited. I am so excited to see that too. We need to start watching, Rye. Um, if you guys haven't watched, any of our listeners, please go watch. It is so wholesome, funny, good, just such a good quality show that you will love. If you like reality TV at all, this is the elite reality TV, in my opinion. best of all
But
time.
it's also one that if you don't like reality TV, that doesn't matter. This is such a good
No.
show if you didn't like it. And if you're like, oh, just reality shows, most people that say they don't like reality is because of the drama and like the whatever unnecessary emphasis on wealth and consumerism. This isn't like that at all. And it's also not
No.
contrived like Love is Blind, which as you guys know, we watch and enjoy, but that is clearly they're putting them in a very game
I also
show-esque situation.
enjoy it way
Love is,
less. Love is Blind
yeah,
is
Love on the
way
Spectrum
less good.
is just the most wholesome, best
Entertaining,
form of
fun.
TV. I hope it never
Yes.
ends.
Me too. I love it so much. Good, worthwhile shout out, right? I am really excited about Miley Cyrus's new album. Obviously, you guys gotta know that we are highly anticipating Something Beautiful, her new album. And
Of course, after endless summer vacation, have such high expectations, but I know Miley won't let us down. She always does a good project, but do you ever feel like that when you really liked an artist's last work and then they're dropping something new and you're like, oh, I hope it lives up to it, but that's not how I should think about art.
definitely, I feel that way, but I also feel like typically with the artists like Miley, that younger now, so good. Then Plastic Hearts, so good. Then Endless Summer Vacation, so good. And they're just different parts of her, and she is clearly in one of the best places of her life, like feeling so true to herself. So I feel like it gots to be good.
You know what I'll never get over is, I know that you're wrong for me. Gonna wish we never met on the day I leave. Have you seen, of course, I know for a fact that you have, but guys, listeners, have you seen the reel that comes up every once in a while of
Oh,
her singing Angels Like You, just raw vocals in her little sports bra in the studio, and you just wonder how anyone can have that voice?
you wonder that, and you wonder how you can be standing in a room with her and just pretending like, yeah, this is casual.
Oh, I would be openly weeping. They would have to
I have
kick me
goosebumps
out of the
right now.
recording booth because I would be wailing.
She was doing it because, she does all the vocal training, obviously. And then there's like her running on the treadmill and singing those lyrics. And, ugh, gosh, I can't get over her. I never will. I don't have to.
um, Speaking of someone else that has a huge fandom, David Lynch, the famous director that recently passed away, I had one of those situations where someone is apparently extremely iconic, but you're not aware of them till after death. I had heard of his movies before: Blue Velvet, Mulholland Drive, Twin Peaks, which I believe is a show. I'd heard of those, but I had never watched them myself. And then some of my like cool artsy friends were posting on their stories all this RIP David Lynch, you changed my life, like your art, whatever. And I'm like, okay, clearly people that are in the know are fans. So I want to go see it. So our theater has been doing a tribute to David Lynch, showing one of his movies. And I thought, great. You know that Quinn and I stand on patronizing the theater instead of just holing up at home to watch all your movies. Excellent. I'll use this opportunity to use my unlimited movie pass as well as become more artistically well rounded. Went to Blue Velvet, no other context other than people's like Instagram stories basically of being like, what a king of like cool art. So I knew it was going to be kind of weird because, when you have those friends that you're like, they're weird but sophisticated. And I
Is
also
that what
knew that
being pretentious is?
yeah, I'm weird, but I think I'm better than you. No, but he was definitely like giving very surrealist vibes. So, as anyone that is an art history major would know, surrealism deals with some strange themes that can often be unsettling. The vibe is to make the viewer uncomfortable. I was prepared for that. I go to Blue Velvet. What I was not prepared for is overt sexual assault, physical violence. The problem is, unfortunately, physical violence is so common in movies that is like not something that is necessarily as jarring to me. I don't like it, whoever likes it, but that is what you see when you go to a Marvel movie that they market to children.
Mm-hmm.
Seeing sexual assault is obviously much less common, and while I do think that it's important to explore these topics, I just didn't know that that's what I was walking into, and it was very upsetting. This whole movie pretty much also scares me as a woman. A lot of what was being dealt with has to do with like voyeurism and people like coming into your space without your knowledge and consent. And yeah,
That
it
sounds
was
like a big no from me.
yeah,
Tell
it
me you
was.
didn't go see it alone.
I was alone and it was at night and it was an empty parking lot as I'm walking back to my car and just feeling like great. Luckily, I have recently invested in some mace, so I literally had my mace in my hand, and I know logically that just seeing something scary doesn't actually make the chances of something bad happening higher than if you hadn't. Like, I know that if I was equally safe in my neighborhood before and after, but of course, when you have that feeling, then you just feel freaked out.
Yeah.
And also, it's harder then in those moments to distinguish between what is like my psyche is just freaked out from that and what is my intuition having a bad feeling. And I was pretty disturbed by that film, which again was the point. I'm not saying anything against David Lynch, his artistry. I think it did what it was intended to do. I just wasn't prepared for that walking in. I thought I was going to see just something different. And Blue Velvet is the film of his that I have by far heard referenced the most. So then I took to TikTok and said, okay, people that watch his movies, is this what I can expect? Because to be honest, right now, I am not looking for this feeling, and I might just have to return to his canon at some other point in time. And all of the girlies said that is like his most overt violent movie. Like, that is kind of agreed upon as his most graphic work, and they were like, sorry, not the best entry point. So to follow that up, this week I went to Mulholland Drive, and it was still definitely designed to make you uncomfortable, but it also had like a romance story throughout it. Woman loving woman romance, which I can appreciate. And it was funny. Like, there was a lot of funny moments and a lot of like satirical humor. But if he's good at anything, I would say from my experience with David Lynch so far, it is making you go from like extreme feelings to another. Like, you feel very anxious, and then it's funny and joyful, and then the like lust of romance, and you're really in it, and I would be like in the middle of feeling like, wow, this is like watching a romance movie, this is lovely, and then all of a sudden you are so uncomfortable, you just feel so awkward. So he definitely has a good hold on manipulating human emotion. You go through it watching these movies, and I did enjoy Mulholland Drive and would give that recommendation. Still, there's definitely upsetting scenes and parts of the movie, but I don't know. We'll see if I continue and see any more David Lynch. I think that it's kind of that situation where if you are feeling like deep diving into art and really breaking down themes and thinking about the big picture, the more artiste vibes, you can approach that type of movie. If you're like, what I really feel like watching is 27 Dresses or Pineapple Express, I probably would say, don't go for David Lynch this time.
Yeah, that I don't know. I have a hard relationship with graphic stuff in that way because I do think it's important to bring awareness to things happening in the world. And I think that not normalizing, that's not what I mean, like creating community and people breaking down the feelings of like guilt or shame or disgust around assault that happens to people in all sorts of different ways. I think that's very important, and I'm very uncomfortable by it. That is why, for me, the violence in every form in a show like Game of Thrones made that very hard for me to watch, and I just feel extremely sensitive to it and don't like. That is something I really liked about seeing Black Bag this week. I went to the movie theater with Sean for a date night. Riley recommended this little spy movie called Black Bag, and I thought that was great, and I so enjoyed watching it. Did I understand what was happening at all times? No. Not I'm someone with movies that it's like I will get the gist, but there are plenty of times where I just won't even hear the words said sometimes that I'm like, wait, what did they even just say? So I miss the context and things move on so quickly. But I really appreciated it because it was basically, yes, like thrilling a bit, but there was just cool architecture and thought provoking, and it was a little uncomfortable at times, but there was almost no, not almost no, but there was very little, like so many spy movies and stuff, there's torturing and killing and
just violence all the time.
Yeah, just nonstop violence. And Sean and I, when we had been out of Netflix, and that is the place that we like, I'm not comfortable scrolling on any other streaming service because I just have rarely been on the other streaming services, and Netflix just does feel like home for me. It's what I've always known. So Sean and I, for like 2 seconds, are scrolling on Hulu being like, first of all, why does this feel so foreign and weird to us? But we saw a show that obviously pops out at you and makes you think, oh, well, that could be interesting because it was called How I Escaped My Cult. And we got partway into the first episode. I can't remember. I might have already said this on the podcast, but we got partway into the first episode and had to turn it off because it was dealing with themes of child sexual abuse, and I just couldn't be taking that. And I feel mixed emotions because I want to listen to survivors and their stories, and I do think it is important that we don't turn a blind eye, obviously, and don't just think of, we can view that assault obviously through the lens of disgust, but I want to not be contributing to a stigma of any sort of shame or anything like that toward survivors. But I just feel very, very uncomfortable with taking in that information, and I don't know. I think that it's fair to only be able to hear and view those stories in doses, and
Yeah.
I think to get real deep and vulnerable with the podcast with my OCD, which is something I've been diagnosed with, I don't need like super graphic content in my sphere and mind often because it is stuff that I can't just tune out, and then it will be very like often appearing in my psyche, and I don't want to. When there's so much going on in our world that is the like reality that we can't stop, and clearly this stuff isn't fiction either. That's real life stuff, but for me, I have to be
Mm-hmm.
careful of only taking in so much so that it's not just a constant state of terrible bad information cycling through my psyche, like I said.
Mm-hmm. I do think that it should always be up for discussion what are the merits versus costs of exploring these topics, and clearly it's different to actually be in discussion about something than seeing a visual depiction of it. And I know that people feel different ways about content warnings or trigger warnings, and I've heard the argument that everyone might have a different trigger, so you can't just like expect that everything is going to come with a label. And while that's true, that what upsets someone could be very different, I do think that in this situation with movies like that, I'm not exactly sure what the answer is, but if it would have said, like, in the description on the website that I was looking at, content warning, this movie contains. Also, if you're worried about spoilers, I just wanted to say that I've seen websites that they fully like have it blurred out and just says like may contain spoilers, but it says content warning there, so you know. If I want to be surprised by what content might be in this movie, I won't look at that. But if I want to be prepared, I can. You click on it and then it says contains depictions of ABC, whatever it has going on, then I would have probably said, oh, pass. I'm gonna see Paddington in Peru because I don't really feel like that vibe. Could I have looked it up on the internet beforehand? Sure, but why would I have thought to? You used to also always see the rating before a movie, whether it's rated R, and then it tells you like why, what content warrants that rating. I feel like they don't do that anymore, at least in the theater that we go to. I never see the rating. Do you, Quinn?
See it for previews. Like it will show
Yeah, for previews.
on previews, it shows what that content rating, but it doesn't show before the movie that you're actually watching, I don't think.
Yeah, so I don't know. I'm not saying it's cut and dry what should be done. However, I also empathize with people that don't like, for whatever reason, whether that's triggering because it's an event that happened for you or within your family, or you have something like OCD, whatever, you just don't feel like it. I think that it's good to equip people with that information, and a lot of the counter argument is people just being like, oh, everyone's so sensitive these days. And I'm someone that doesn't think that it's such a problem for people to be sensitive to things that have been extremely damaging to them.
Traumatizing.
Yeah.
I think it is an interesting discussion because you and I will once in a while bring up something like this on the podcast, and I have thought about like what is our responsibility for content warnings. And I think in my mind, after pondering on it, what seems to be the difference is that we aren't actually in graphic detail talking about or breaking down details of this, where it's more that the words are mentioned, like we said, sexual abuse and sexual violence, and that I'm curious about, and I don't know if I'm correct in this thinking, but it seems like a content warning when something becomes like the explicit graphic details, that's when it's really necessary, more so than like just that the talk of the thing is happening. I don't know.
I think it's so clearly nuanced, as we love to say. It's nuanced that's why it's not just there's one way to do it, but I definitely am in favor of more of the turn that I've seen in, for example, true crime podcasts and reporting, trying to get less into the details because for survivors and victims, and most people, that if your claim is the benefit is not keeping these things in the dark and making people realize that it is normal to go through this and they shouldn't have to hide these things that have happened to them, you can explore those themes without getting into the nitty-gritty details, because sometimes at that point is when I'm wondering, oh, is this just kind of voyeuristic? Not even voyeuristic, what's the term for it, Quinn, where you're...
I don't know if this is really appropriate to say, but it's like whatever porn. What is that?
Yeah, like they call it trauma porn.
Yeah.
Where you're just in this sort of not thoughtful, not intentional way consuming other people's suffering.
Yeah.
And that to me is where that's actually disrespectful of a survivor, because you're not recognizing their humanity. You don't have to know exactly what trauma specifically happened to them to be able to give them empathy and support. And at that point, yeah, that's where to me I feel that in art is almost a different conversation, because you're exploring things that are supposed to, not all art is supposed to, but many artists want to push the edge of things and not be in the safe bounds and territories. So I'm not saying that you can't make a movie that does have those depictions. However, my personal philosophy is I would be very, very intentional and considerate about, is this forwarding the message that I want it to? Is this really necessary to get into the nitty gritty with this? Or am I kind of just indulging something personally? If you are, not saying that you can't do it anyway, but that's my moral compass. There are books now also. I don't remember the name of this book, but the one book talk creator that I follow was like, this book has been blowing up and I really encourage you not to support it, because it is like a fantasy love story between an adult and a 14-year-old, and I don't think that we need to be supporting that type of work. And other people feel very differently of, we should be able to read about these sorts of dynamics in art. We can't limit what people can say and can create.
Yeah, I mean, where I could see that being different is that it doesn't go into graphic detail and it is not actually a smut, but it tells the love story of this situation, because I see what people mean if the case is that the book is just sharing about this story, but not getting into detail and actually sexualizing this person or making like, but those dynamics do happen. And so I see that us being aware and not being like, oh, sweep that under the rug, that stuff is never happening. No, we know that adults abuse children, and I think it is important for sure that we are aware and talk about that, because it needs to be definitely. I don't think the solution is out of sight, out of mind, but we don't want to be glorifying it, obviously. Wow.
FYI, this was not the intention of where we were gonna take the episode,
No.
but me bringing up David Lynch just got us here, and Quinn and I want to voice how we're feeling about these different issues that we're all going through. And I think it's been a very prevalent topic, maybe always, but especially in my adulthood, I think the conversation of the art versus the artist has really come up for people. And can you engage with art that you morally disagree with, or is that like supporting the problem? Or can you enjoy and consume the art of a person that you don't agree with? Or is that just giving them like lens to be the person that you don't? I think that that is valid to continue to consider, and I will be interested to learn more now about David Lynch and his motivations, because I can see his work and put any of my interpretations on it that I want, but I don't know where he was coming from with these things, and there are different schools of thought that come with that as well. Some people say you should never look at the author's intention because you should be able to just glean all meaning from a work, but I personally don't really buy that. I think that the intention matters, and what you're putting into it is inevitably going to color how people understand the creation.
Yeah. Well, thanks everyone for hearing us out through that. It's not ever exactly fun to have discussion like this, but it is important to think about the matters of the world. And I've been thinking about how Riley and I, and of course, not us alone, but we are people that can very easily and quickly in conversation transition from something that seems very light and um either fun and funny, or just like casual and kind of quote unquote unimportant, into something a lot more serious, and whether it's heavy or whether it's just deep, and move in and out of that and move past that as well. And I know that not everybody operates that same way. And I think that for some people, it can feel very confronting to go from what's a casual and like feels like a very harmless or lightweight conversation into something that's like really digging in. So I don't really have a judgment for us based on that. I think that we grew up in a way that we knew we'd always have, um we were just in a safe place for deep thoughts and discussion, and we built, like I've mentioned before, I just think we do have resilience to challenging, difficult conversation from having lots of practice moving through that. And always, we were just raised to confront these things. And in our family, whatever subject it may be, we always, like, there really weren't subjects off the table. So I think from a young age, we confronted things head on, and it wasn't really like, oh, at our house, like, we don't talk about that. I remember being with other friends' houses where they're like, do not bring that up. Like, we cannot talk about that at my house. Or even still, I have friends that are like, I have never spoken about like my period or something in front of my family. Like, we do not talk about that type of thing. And I'm really grateful that we've been able to have the type of conversation that we have with not only family, also friends. Like, I think we've made a point of having relationships with people that are able to go deep, because that's just the type of people we are. But I hope that, I mean, I'm sure that the listeners that we are attracting are going to be people that are dynamic in the way of loving a fun, lighthearted, good time talking about thongs between your butt cheeks, and then also diving deep about issues that are not so fun and light. I don't know. It's a lot to think about. It's food for thought. And I also think, I don't think that either of us did any sort of trauma dumping. That's not how I feel whatsoever, but it was interesting listening to um Getting Better now with JVN. They rebranded from Getting Curious to Getting Better for their podcast um about trauma dumping, and I thought that was an insightful episode where I actually felt pretty good about myself and the fact that I don't think I've been, at least in recent years, much of a trauma dumper, more of a making sure that a conversation is consensual before diving into like dumping my trauma on someone. So, anyway,
Yeah.
I don't really have
Thank
a
you for
well-rounded
bringing
point for this, just thinking, just thoughts.
I thought that was well rounded. Thank you for bringing up that that could be hard for some people. I truly didn't even really think because I, like you said, have a history with you in conversation of if something feels important to me to like explore and talk about with someone that is available. And so, of course, that coming out in this space is going to be different. I like that about a podcast that we can have open discussions about adult topics that are important to be able to discuss in the open, because on other platforms like TikTok, for example, you have to very much speak in innuendo because of the censorship of certain words, and people have figured it out, like they say SA, talking about sexual assault, and so you still kind of can, but I find, in my point of view, being able to just like speak things openly is very useful in healing and bringing things out of the dark that have in the past been kept very hushed and I think caused more harm than good. But the other beautiful thing about a podcast is when you're done engaging with it, you can just turn it off. And that is not what I want. I hope that we're making content that feels accessible to people and worthwhile, but at the same time, if an episode is not for you that day, just like if going to that movie does not sound like what you need in your brainwave, that is fair enough. And if you hear something that's like, you know what? I appreciate you might have had an insightful conversation about this and are coming from a good place, but I need happy right now. You do you, and is no harm, no foul. You can come back to us for an episode where we do just have silly vibes, and we tried to balance it out with both. It's not like I feel like we're gloom and doom. We're just
I don't think so either. I don't think that's
living
the point at all.
in.
I think
Yeah.
to be authentic and like I don't at all. My takeaway is not, oh, we're just bringing up so much heavy shit. There's heavy shit. Like, I think it's very, for me, I think the Q&R code has made it very freaking clear from the jump. Like, we are not just girly sleepover vibes podcast. I do think that's a mix. Maybe, you know what? Our type
Maybe
of
not your girly
yeah,
sleepover vibes,
it
but
is pretty much our girly sleepover vibes that, like, we want to talk about the fun and just enriching parts of life. And that comes with depth and that comes with nuance and diversity in all the senses. Like, there are plenty of times that we feel just happy go lucky, and plenty of times, like, there's just, that's life. There, in life, there is thick, heavy, painful, frustrating, confusing things that happen. And you and I are
and
not,
they're all mixed up with the joyful,
the happy,
and
yes,
silly and romantic. Like the
yeah,
happens all at once.
exactly. It's not clean cut and separate and just like, I think that you and I can give us a pat on the back because I think we do a very good job of having balance and not focusing just on what our favorite beauty products are, and also not just focusing about genocide that's going on. Like, I think it's important to me to be multidimensional and dynamic, and I think it's worthwhile to engage in both types of conversation. And I think it is also like stimulating mentally to be able to be, sometimes like, yes, I am just feeling like just a girl right now, and I do want to talk about my favorite lip gloss shade I'm buying in the Sephora sale. And I also want to tell you that this thing that's heavy has weighed on my mind. I hopefully, you know, being intelligent and inquisitive is not for the weak minded. If you want growth and you're curious, that comes with ten all the emotions, the more sticky, heavy emotions I talked about.
As I said to Brayden the other day, if ignorance is bliss, then save that for the people that can only handle bliss. Because I don't want to be ignorant, and I live a very joyful, content life, even with the weight of the world, of the knowledge of what's going on my shoulders. I just don't think that it's better to act like reality is different than what it is. Thanks for being along with us. If you want to see more from us, not just in your little podcasting ears, but feasting your eyes, we are on YouTube now at the Q&R code, as well as on social media at Quinn Liljestrom, at Riley Liljestrom, and on TikTok at the Q&R code podcast. Thank you for being with us. We are so grateful to be speaking with you yet again. We'll talk to you very soon.
Goodbye. Thank you guys.